Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching the Salty Sea, and I love the hobby part of the game, and I actually do love narrative play, and I can't wait to talk to you about what was probably the most incredible confluence of the two that I've ever borne witness to, which was the narrative event at Adepticon. I've already covered the competitive event at Adepticon. You can check that out. I will link it in the description down below. But a whole different type of gaming was on display here, and I want to cover the entirety of Warcry. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about this event because it was pretty incredible. First of all, my submission, quote unquote, to the Painting Olympics of Warcry. If I'd known that, I have a couple teams that are painted better than these, but I do love my Tempest Lords. They're my favorite narrative team. It's them and my Slaneech, which is my Slanesh Tzeentch mashup. But the Tempest Lords are Oraculous and Verbosha's noble and just cadre of Tempest Lords, convened for the purpose, righteous and good, of making safe the ferocious Gnarlwood for the divine benefit of Sigmar's faithful in Gur and elsewhere. I also put in an allied tree revenant scion. It is partly for gaming purposes, but it also functions as a forestry guide during their expedition. The Tempest Lords are not from Gur. They are from Haish and Akshi. They have strongholds in both. They are in Tempest's Eye, which is a sort of mountain city in Akshi. And then a lot of Haish, the stormcasts that are there are the Tempest Lords. I started painting my my Stormcast like Tempest Lords, and at first it was sort of as a joke, like they have the Team America World Police color scheme, the Ultramarines. But I started getting really into the actual lore of the faction, where I started kind of creating headcanon for mine, where the whole thing about Tempest, the Tempest Lords, is that they are all like various nobles and aristocrats that Sigmar decided are the good ones. They are people who probably didn't have to have died fighting chaos, but sort of demanded to be on the front lines defending their people. They're known as being great orators, which I've merged into my own lore in terms of deciding that most of the Tempest Lords leaders in my group are just known for being way too talkative. So they all have names like Verbosha. And so they've all been stuck together because they just drone on and on and on. And so they are all these very well-meaning but insufferable blowhards that everybody wants them on their team, but nobody really wants to have to spend too much time with them. And I can't imagine what it must be like, in their own barracks, in their own campfire, right? It's this like crew of, 10. I think we were allowed to bring 15. I think I only brought like 12 or so Stormcast who are just traversing through the Gnarlwood, and I don't know what their campfire must be like. It must just be constant talking, very loud debates everywhere, but they do fight hard, and so that's what I like about them. I really like playing Stormcast, especially with the Knight Arcanum. The Knight Arcanum is like the most fun piece. When I play them competitively, I use Calthea, but the Knight Arcanum is just more fun. She's got Bolt from the Heavens, and she's almost as good as Calthea. Maybe she's not almost as good, but she is really good. It's just that Calthea's ability is just sort of more powerful at doing what wins competitive games. And so that was a really nice time to kind of let loose with these guys. I had a great tournament. Game 1 was against Devin. He was running Grinkrak's Loon Court, which was so cool to see. That's the kind of thing you almost never get to see, and so it was sweet. Grinkrak's Loon Court are all toughness 4, which does sort of change the math on a lot of my fighters. I had a bunch of Vindictors. One thing I really liked about my roster was if my opponent was up for kind of a spicy, more competitive game, I could bring a bunch of Annihilators. But if they were bringing something sort of pretty chill, I could bring, very few Annihilators. And so I could kind of do any balance of that I wanted. So, for example, against Devin, I only played 1 Annihilator. Against Brian, I played 4. Against Zendi, I played 2, right? Because you could kind of match the number of Annihilators to how, how tight a game your opponent wanted to play, which is something I really love about Stormcast as well. Game 2 was against Brian Bledsoe, who is one of my favorite opponents. I played him 2 years ago at the narrative tournament. He's really fun. Yeah, he wasn't able to make it last year to Adepticon. I was really, really happy to see him and play against him. His buddy Steve demanded that I crush him, which is hilarious because I brought the most Annihilators when I played him. And his Ogroid Myrmidon, who is in the background of that picture, took out one Annihilator, almost took out my leader, almost took out another Annihilator when I had my leader retreat away from him, was absolutely terrorizing my team, and I actually barely won that game. And then I had a really fun draw against Zendi with her Nurgle Rotbringers that was pretty sweet. I really like narrative events. I've run a few of them. I'm really excited to run my next one, which is going to be the Renegade Open, April 27th and 28th in the Twin Cities. I know it's a month away, so that's not the most warning, but if you can make it, if you're in the Midwest, I really hope you come check it out. One of the most common things I see from players who are into Warcry at a casual level, which is most of us, right? Most of the people running tournaments are pretty competitively focused, or they're people who don't really know don't play Warcry, and that's okay, but they're just like, I'm TOing this because we're supposed to have a Warcry event and I like the idea of Warcry then, so I'm going to be the one to host here. And you don't see a ton of tournaments hosted by just like casual Warcry players, even though I think that most of the player base is in that situation. And so I wanted to put together just sort of a core takeaways here of what I think makes a really good narrative event, so that people thinking about running not just a narrative event, but a casual focused event can have some guidelines here. So the first one is battle plans. And I'm a big believer in the battle plans really defining a tournament. The games that people are going to play are going to be, that's their experience on the board. And the cool thing about narrative battle plans, there's a little bit different things you're maximizing for. And the Dogs of Warcry at their very first narrative event really sort of put the building blocks of my thinking together on this. And then in the last one, I had some issues that I think were mostly resolved in this one. And so I want to talk about that. The first is, at any tournament, whether it's casual or competitive, you want your battle plans to really be focused on providing places for your sort of players to interact. One of the reasons why objectives are used so much in competitive play is because it forces you to walk to a place where you will meet your opponent. And so that sort of forces interaction. Now, a lot of people don't like objectives in narrative play. I personally think that having an objective game in a narrative tournament can be fun. You just need to kind of flavor it, right? But if you're not going to play with objectives, you need to find things that are going to force your opponents to sort of meet in a place, right? And so I think that the second mission was such a perfect example of this. Each terrain piece with a platform on it became like an objective. We had to fight over the terrain pieces. So that made it sort of a more flavorful version of an objective mission. And then instead of scoring it like just bodies on the point like an objective, it was scored by the first person to get there gets to sort of plant a flag, and then if you take someone down, you switch it and now it's yours, and then if they take you down. But if you make everybody fall off of it and you're the last one on it, then it's yours also. So it both allowed for wacky stuff to happen, and it still forced people to be interacting the whole time, which I think is the really beautiful middle ground that you want for a narrative battle plan that can work really well and be really fun. So that's kind of what I think is the ideal thing to shoot for. And then going on to story, I think they did a great job with this too. The ideal I've found is to provide enough story to latch onto, but to be vague enough to let people kind of riff on their own take on it. Especially because even in a narrative tournament, you have to understand that about 4 out of 5 of your players don't care about the story. And that's okay, right? I've run a few narrative tournaments. I've been a part of a few narrative tournaments. In all of them, I would say about 4 out of 5 of the people really don't care about the story. And that's okay, right? But that's why you want to be, a little bit vague with the story. But the few people who do care, they really want to like see a little bit of effort put in, or just a little bit of effort really helps them. And there's also a group of people who they don't care about the story. Like, let's say you have those 5 people, right? One of them really cares about the story. 4 of them don't. But even of those 4, 2 of them will appreciate that you put effort in, even if they were going to show up anyway and have a good time anyway. So that's where I think you really want to just like give a real sort of setting for people to get into, but don't just like kill yourself writing page upon page upon page. Some people will really, really appreciate it, but you can relax a little bit. You can sort of lean on actual narrative elements that are in the AOS story so that you don't have to do all the work yourself sometimes. The first one I ever did, I wrote these like massive 3-page long short stories for each faction in my narrative quest, and I'll never do that again, trust me. It was actually kind of fun writing them, but it was a lot more work than I wanted to be doing. And so, as much story as you are inspired to create it, but don't worry if you don't have pages and pages, because people are going to have a good time as long as you give them a good setting to sit in that they can then add their own kind of story onto. The third thing I think is where a lot of casual players are looking for tournaments like this, where people have, I think, an idea that their enjoyment of a game might be ruined if someone shows up with a really powerful list and beats them and they feel like they don't have a chance. I think this is a big fear in a lot of people's eyes. I think when people get upset about my most competitive takes in my videos, I think some of it comes from this place. I get some of these comments sometimes in my videos, and I just want everyone to relax. One thing that I thought was really brilliantly done about the Dogs of Warcry event that I think they really perfected this year was their ability to just let everyone coexist regardless of how powerful their theme was. They did a pairing system that I'm calling Jarlsberg pairing because it's a little fancier than Swiss pairing. But basically they said, who feels bad about how badly they won their last game? And a decent number of people raised their hands, and then they had those people play each other. I think that's a really good way to do it in a super casual event like this, where you don't really care who wins the tournament, but you want the people who do want to win the tournament to at least feel like they are playing the competitive games against other competitive people, right? Because no matter what crowd you're playing against, and I see this a lot because I see the comments from, there's a lot of people who maybe they interact with the people they interact with, right? But I see the comments on Discord, and I see the comments on like Facebook and Reddit, and I see the comments on my videos and in what's a pretty large local play group in the Twin Cities. And I think a really common thing is at every level, people do like to win, but they also don't want to necessarily be seen as being the most cutthroat person in the room. But what it means is people try to take really powerful stuff at every level. We have a casual league in the Twin Cities where about maybe a half, maybe even 2/3 of the people in the league haven't played a lot of Warcry before the league, and still about 1/3 of those people took really powerful stuff from some of the most powerful factions in the game that they had heard was really good, right? Because people, even very casual players, want to play powerful lists a lot of the time. And so I thought they did an incredible job just kind of setting up this way for people to coexist and just talking about it at the very beginning, that it's okay if you really want to try to win all your games, and it's okay if you didn't bring a list capable of winning all its games, but you would still like to try to play some close games today. And we're going to just try to make that happen for everyone. I thought that was really beautiful. And it's definitely something that I'm going to try to figure out how to do in my narrative tournament. We're going to split the players into teams. And so hopefully the plan is the people who feel like they're bringing some spice, feel like they have something powerful going on, they'll be able to kind of separate out into the two teams so that they can play against each other. And then we'll have, essentially, as records evolve on both teams, we will have sort of the champions of each teams kind of challenging each other as the event goes on, which is something I'm really excited about. And then the points that are earned from each game are still going to be equal. So even if you are sort of, having one of the least competitive lists or sort of experiences that you're creating on your team, you are still earning the same amount, or you still have the same earnings potential for points in the overall sort of narrative construction as the top champions on your team are sort of have potential to earn, right? And so the idea here is to kind of give this equal weight to each type of player as they're playing on their own teams, which is my goal. And so I really hope people come out to check it out. The last is items, where you want your items to be impactful but not game defining, which is a really hard balance to do. And the reason is because testing is really hard, and narrative gaming is much more complex than competitive gaming. People talk about competitive players as like the sweatier group or like the a-hole tryhards. The opposite is true. They're taking the easy way out. Okay, it's much, much more difficult to play narratively than it is to play competitively. And the reason is because items are so complex and the effect that they have on the game is so complex. So ideally, you want to have it so that if someone smooth brains their way through their items, they're not going to necessarily have the kind of huge home run plays that are possible with some items, but they at least won't necessarily feel like they never had a chance in any game and, their experience was ruined because they didn't think hard enough about their items, right? So you want the items to both feel important when you get the right synergies with them, and also never feel like the entire point of the game was to do good items, which is a really tough balance. I've found that campaigns in Warcry don't necessarily strike this balance very well. I had a video where I said the narrative mode in Warcry was essentially unplayable, and it made a lot of people very angry. And the reason I call it unplayable is that campaign item sets tend to break down after about 6 or 7 games. There's some combos that are just way too powerful. And so you really cannot use the core book campaign structure if some people are experienced and some people are not. It's going to create unfun situations. So you need to make your own items. And that's what the Dogs of Warcry have been doing the whole time. Not all their items are equally powerful, but that's okay because they've done a great job of just removing the really broken ones and then letting everything else just kind of exist, right? The really medium ones and the really weak ones can still coexist because a medium item doesn't outclass a weak item in quite the same way that the super powerful ones outclass everything. So that's a really interesting balance to try to strike. And I do encourage people who are trying to do a narrative tournament, ask around for people who have played before, maybe preset certain item things. I'm going to have various preset item combos where you get to bring one heroic trait and one item out of a essentially menu of 8 options. And so that is, I think, a much better way to approach these narrative tournaments than just kind of letting people go crazy with the core book, because people will ruin each other's experiences if they are just going crazy with the core book. That is kind of an inevitability. So just avoid that as much as possible. That's kind of everything I've learned about running narrative tournaments without just like getting into logistics and stuff with you, which I won't bore you with. But I am going to be sort of applying all of this to the 2 tournaments that I'm running at the Renegade Open. I hope everyone who is in the Midwest goes and signs up. Sign up quickly, because if we sell out, we get to steal table space from AOS. Not that we're stealing it. It's more that there is neutral table space that isn't sort of taken yet because events haven't sold out yet. And so if events sell out, the first events to sell out get to have the neutral table space. And we would only need like a couple tables to add 4 more players, or to, like we can put twice as many players on a table as any other game can. So if we sell out early, we can get more players without necessarily needing a ton more space, which is just great for everyone in the event center, because it's just more people per space. So I hope everyone signs up. I will be putting the link for how to do so down below. Click it, sign up right away. I can't wait to see you. Now let's get into the painting. And I'm going to start where we should, with the person who won favorite warband. This is Kyle Knapp's Water Seekers. My picture doesn't do it justice, so I asked him to send me a few pictures that he's taken in a light box. But a really incredible sort of take on the faction, where they're just sort of all underwater. It's a little bit like an Idneth Deepkin version of the Flame Seekers. Some really cool sort of takes on their beards, on the resin basing. I thought this basing scheme was really incredible. This was one of my 3 votes. The sort of bright green smoke highlighting a few of them was pretty cool. Just every single part of it was just a really amazing sort of concept moving into execution that I really, really loved. Kyle, also, for people who watched the other video, took 4th in the competitive event. So a really incredible display of being able to, go both ways as far as hobby and playing hard is concerned. I also took a look. I'm going to show a bunch of warbands now. This was really, I thought, the painting Olympics of Warcry. The whole community showed out and really brought some really amazing different stuff. I really liked this Grimdark Slanesh. I didn't get who had painted it, because when I told the person piloting it that I thought it was really amazing, they said, "Oh, thanks, but I didn't paint it." But that's okay, because I thought it was really cool. You don't really see Slanesh done this way very often. And I really like the little OSL on the Painmaster's shield there in the back. Then we have some really awesome Desert Sand Gorgers with Hrothgorn by Steve Colzer. Really cool, where it just like, yes, it's monocolor, but it all kind of fits together in this desert theme. And then Hrothgorn, who normally has a very different color scheme than the Gorgers, was painted and he just like fits in perfectly. And so it all kind of works together. And it's also a really good idea for running Gorgers, where you can, especially in a tournament that allows rosters, where you can put Hrothgorn on your roster, but then you can just have his Noblars if you want on your team. But it lets you put some numbers into Gorgers, which is kind of cool. This is a Splintered Fang warband. Again, I didn't always get the best pictures, but it was like a really bright and sort of evocative color scheme that I really liked. Here is Matt Schoening with a really cool... I forget what this color scheme is called, but where it's like a lot of desaturation and then a red pop, which I thought was really, really cool. Really cool sort of use of contrast there, not just with contrasting colors, although you do see some greens in this cloak and in the sort of furry part of the monster, but just like the contrast between dull and bright, which I thought was really cool. Here, you almost never see SCE Vanguard in Warcry. They're kind of hard to list build with, but Dan Albright didn't care. He went with these incredible bright orange Vanguards. There was a lot of really cool detail in the armor itself in terms of the way it was highlighted and the way it was sort of the way it was done. He didn't paint these, but they're still amazing. And so, yeah, great taste for you, Dan. Then, really funny was Mike Sansom, who did an all Pokemon list. I have no idea where he even got the Pokeballs to do it, but all of these creatures are various, creatures that he converted a little bit. Like this Zubat is a flying squig that he painted. Some of them, like Kingler, is just a Dune Claw, and he didn't even have to do anything to it. So really cool job, like sourcing everything he needed and then doing the little conversions. Like I think this Charmeleon is a skink with a bit of flame put on the tail, something like that. They all proxied as Gargoyleans, which in Cities of Sigmar are just like the weird little creatures. And so then he had just a few humans. One of his was painted like Ash Ketchum, which I think is really cool. Oh, by the way, he was dressed up as Ash Ketchum for the event as well, which is amazing. This is the Sanguinary Guard. I didn't get who the painter was, but I really liked this Khorne. I really liked this display board. I thought they fit perfectly in it as far as, getting a lot of non-red colors into Khorne is something I really like and something I'm actually sort of reapproaching with my Khorne Mortals, and I'm actually repainting my Blood Warriors that were one of the first things I painted, and I'm painting them to be like red accents instead of just like really loudly red all the time, because I really do like these Khorne, the Khorne color schemes like this one where the red is a little bit more subtle. Alex Davey did some incredible stuff with Hexbane's Wildercore. This is Wildercore Hunters with Hexbane's Hunters allied in. Really amazing, where it's fairly like dour witch hunter vibe, but then with these flaming weapons thrown in to get some pop. This was one of my three votes for favorite warband, and the reason was the incredible detail work on the dogs. This is one of those warbands that really holds up. Most paint schemes, listen, nothing I've ever painted holds up to putting a camera right up close to it, but this one really did. He got really cool fur texture on the dogs that is not there on the miniatures themselves. So a really amazing sort of display of painting prowess. I will show the last one that I voted for. You get 3 votes for favorite warband. The last one will be the last one in this video. But these dogs were really amazing. The sort of use of the flaming weapons was really cool, and so I just really loved this warband. This one's really sweet, where it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs theme. I don't know whose it was, but they brought a Knight Arcanum, which means they are a person of culture and sophistication. That is one of my favorite leaders to play with. But then also Vulcan Flameseekers are just really sweet. They do benefit quite a bit from having a Stormcast ally around, and so I like that they included her there. Let's get into these Lumineth. This was Jose Santana. Every Lumineth player I see paints it really well. I don't know what it is about Lumineth. You never see badly painted Lumineth, and this is no exception. I really like, again, this is a color scheme that is not something I would have thought of, but it just is really, really, like, he made the regular porcelain armor a little bit more gritty than you normally see it, and then took kind of the dark teal, and it went really well with that, I thought. This was him. He also brought Lumineth to the competitive, but this was him bringing all of the models he couldn't quite justify bringing in the competitive. Like, he's got 2 kangaroos instead of 1, and he's got double Weird Wizard. I don't think he had any of the Weird Wizards in the competitive. So you love to see that, sort of bringing the same team, but sort of chilling it out a little bit. I thought the blends on these Iron Golems were really incredible. I hadn't gone up close enough to them by the time I did my votes, although the 3 I voted for I really, really loved. All I'm saying is I thought these were painted, like in terms of just skill of painting, I thought these were among the very best. Those sort of highlights in the center, those are not from the light at the event. Those were actually painted there in sort of a non-metallic metal purple, which was really incredible, I thought, to be right up close to. And of course, the basing is really well done as well. This was Peter Mercencavage on Gloomspite Gits. This is another one where he took the same faction as he took in competitive, but he took all the models that he couldn't quite justify running in competitive, which I think is really sweet. Although I do see a Brugit there. But just really amazing. I really like the theming of the display board to the Warband. I really like the kind of conversion of the Trog with the guy running it. I actually have no idea what that was being played as, but I think it's a really amazing piece. So I definitely went up close to it. Yeah, just a really cool Warband by Pete. I unfortunately don't know who this is, but I really love this display board as well. Lava Corn, I think, works really, really well. I thought that the sort of choices for how to paint like the Blood Reavers worked really well with the basing itself. And again, this is another Corn where the red is not like washed all over everything all the time, which I think makes the red pop a lot better. These Skaven were so cool. Okay, so first the basing is like pirate themed. There's no way I'm going to be able to find that in this to cut it out. All right, so first the basing was pirate themed. The sort of patterning on the blue Storm Fiend I thought was incredible. Like the sort of almost comic book style of it was amazing. Yeah, just the whole theme in general. If you look close on the like red Storm Fiend, you can see the algae in like that's sort of gone into the muscles, which is really cool. Really amazing. Well done by John. All right, so now we have Pavan's Black Talons. These are really cool, and something was off with my lighting contrast, so you couldn't really see some of the details, but in person they were really incredible. And I just love what GW is doing with giving us these all-character warbands. Yes, they're a little bit more expensive. $75 for the Black Talons feels okay. $75 for, at least in my personal opinion, $75 for Callus and Toll, which is like much smaller miniatures, does feel like a little bit of a stretch. And if the brands are, it's 5 miniatures and they're all really small and they are $75 too, that's a bit of a stretch. But what I will say is the way that these work in Warcry is so cool. The way they've put real effort into making each of them feel like a character on the battlefield is so cool. And I think Pavan really, really did well. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm so sorry. I actually had dinner with him one of the nights at Adepticon, and he's really fun. So, yeah, really incredible warband, great basing scheme, and making the gold color scheme really, really work is really nice. Sometimes, you know, they can be like too bright or too dim, and I think he really nailed the balance of it. And then having the Ideneth wizard be like a totally contrasting blue off to the side, I think is really cool and kind of pops with the warband, especially since the bird is the same blue as the wizard, you know, all of that. It really, really works. Also incredibly brave because we did have permadeaths in this narrative campaign, and he brought no additional allies for his Black Talons. So if anyone permadies, that's it, but I think he kept them all alive throughout the event. This was Austin Lewis taking a little victory lap with his third place list. I think he had a couple different fighters, but a similar thing with the horses and a really cool basing scheme as always. You know, the sort of autumnal, it's like the first snow of the year kind of thing, which I really like. Like he's still got the fallen leaves, and then it's also like the snow effects at the same time, which I think is really, really cool and really thematic. These are a bunch of flies. This was James Kresh. This is another person bringing kind of a weirder version of the thing they brought the previous day. He was also Nurgle the previous day. But yeah, I really love the flies. They are way bigger than you think they will be, but I think that's really sweet and just a really thematic warband. It was also great to see sort of casual Nurgle demons. You rarely see Nurgle demons run in any kind of way that isn't just the spiciest way to run Nurgle demons, but James did it, and he brought 4 flies, which is really awesome. These were a couple partial picks where I just didn't think to get the whole warband. I'm not a journalist, but I really wish I'd gotten the whole thing. I sort of went straight in on just kind of the lead, or some of the leaders. Those aren't even the leaders of the Jade Empire. Those are just the desecrators who feel like the leaders when you play Jade Obelisk. But I thought Dave's version of Jade Obelisk was really cool. This is Chris's Ogre Warhulk, where that is Doralia Van Dence up in the sort of catbird seat on top of the Warhulk, which is a really cool little conversion. And I thought the wood grain paneling came out really nicely. This was my buddy Avery's warband that he brought. I didn't get a picture because he was still playing when I came and walked by. I also didn't get a picture of Joe Alexander's warband, who was playing against him while he walked by. But I thought these were really cool. And he played this as Cities of Sigmar, but he played it because he saw a sort of different line of miniatures that he thought was really cool. And then he was trying to figure out what he could run them as. And so he made a sort of non-metallic metal Stormcast to go with them, and I think it's really awesome. This is Brett with Stormcast that you could see from across the room. He got a really good, shockingly white vibe off of that armor, which worked really well, and it's just such a clean paint job, and I really liked it. Patrick Schmeling had probably the coolest conversion in the room, which was his Ogre Warhulk was a crazy 3D printed guy that he had then put a giant artillery engine on, and I just completely potato cammed it. Again, I'm not a real journalist, I'm sorry, because this warband was really, really cool, one of the most beautiful ones at the event, and I just you can't see anything, it's super blurry. But what you can see, look at the incredibly painted terrain. It's perfect focus on this set of stairs behind the warband. A great reminder to always check what your camera is focusing on. This was the last of my votes for Best Warband. I thought that the Nevermore Guard by Darcy Bono was really incredible. I like poetry in general, so theming your warband around Edgar Allan Poe is an easy way into my heart. But look at some of the detail work, on the leader. She did the whole book. She did incredible work on the lantern. This paint job holds up to this is the closest I put the camera for anybody. She's got the snow effects on the bottom of the robe. And in person, the incredible attention to detail, the face looks really good. The incredible attention to detail in person, when it's every fighter in the warband, ends up being really overwhelmingly crisp. Which I really liked. And then, the choice of ally was perfect, having a Knight Relictor to go with them, but with the skull, he kind of fit the Gothic poetry theme of the whole warband. And this was, the other one of the 3 that I voted for favorite warband. I thought this was absolutely incredible. That's sort of everything that we got from the Painting Olympics of Warcry, but I was really blown away by the sort of level of competition that we saw at this event, just in terms of everyone just showing off. Everyone who plays Warcry in the United States who can make it to these events was just showing off their very best paint scheme of the year, and I thought it was really incredible. I was the schmuck who brought something I painted a year and a half ago, but next time I go, I'm definitely going to try to bring something that's one of my most recent paint jobs for the event. Loved doing it. Can't wait to run a narrative event of my own at the end of April. And until then, may all your rolls be crits.